Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Sam Kern. We warmly welcome the family of Private Jack Sidney Orr, whose story will be told shortly by Wing Commander Aaron Moore from the Royal Australian Air Force, who is Private Jack Orr's great-nephew. This evening, we also warmly welcome Vice Admiral Bradley and the accompanying delegation, Mr. Dennis Baker, President of the 2nd 20th Infantry Battalion Association, and the delegation representing 1 Recruit Training Unit, Course 17 from the Royal Australian Air Force based in Wagga. As always, we warmly welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returns and Services League of Australia and the RSL and RSL Services Club Association. We welcome the members who are watching the broadcast of the ceremony across Australia. During this event ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by the family, visitors to the memorial, and students from St. Thomas Schools, Goodwood, South Australia. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. Students, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was a vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway lands. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they'd done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance through the memorial galleries. Here is the spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the name of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Jack Sidney Orr. Jack Orr was born on the 20th of February 1919 in the Sydney suburb of Chatswood, the youngest son of William and Lucy Orr. Jack enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force on 9th of July 1940 at the age of 21, one of 3 brothers who had served during the war. His brother Harry served as a chaplain and William joined the Royal Australian Air Force. Jack's closest sibling, however, was his sister Dorothy, with whom he communicated regularly as long as he was able. Jack was posted to the 5th Battalion, but in October was transferred to the 2nd 10th Field Ambulance. In mid-October, he was found absent without leave and confined to barracks for a week as punishment. This was the first in a string of incidents that occurred as Orr bristled against military discipline. He was found absent without leave again in March 1941 and confined to barracks for 2 days. In late March 1941 at Bathurst, he was found guilty of using insulting language when he stated that sergeant majors and officers mean nothing to me out of camp, whilst wearing a uniform to which he was not entitled. He received a substantial fine for his troubles. In June 1941, he was again found absent without leave and confined to barracks for a week. In mid-August 1941, Private Orr arrived in Singapore. Strategically located in the Strait of Malacca between the Pacific and Indian Oceans, Singapore was the site of a major British naval base and was considered by many to be impregnable. The Japanese army invaded the Malay Peninsula in early December 1941, landing in the north at Kota Bharu in Malaya and Patani and Songkhla in Thailand, and moved with incredible speed south along the peninsula. The 2nd 10th Field Ambulance was involved in providing medical support to the 2nd 30th Infantry Battalion's ambush at Gamas, and various parts of the unit were then involved in the withdrawal to Singapore. The defence of Singapore was poorly planned and executed. Allied forces were spread too thin to resist the Japanese, and Allied air cover had been almost completely destroyed in the opening days of the campaign. With 1 million citizens trapped in the city and water supplies at critical levels, British Commander Lieutenant General Arthur Percival surrendered on the 15th of February 1942. More than 15,000 Australian soldiers were captured. Of these, almost half would die whilst prisoners of war. In the aftermath of the fall of Singapore, Private Orr became a prisoner at the sprawling prisoner of war camp in Changi. It wasn't long before the prisoners at Changi were formed into work parties to provide forced labour for the Japanese army. Orr left Singapore with B-Force on the tramp ship Ubi Maru on the 8th of July 1942. After a 9-day journey in poor conditions, the group disembarked at Sandakan, where the prisoners were put to work building airstrips. For the first 12 months, they were treated relatively well. But when Formosan guards began arriving, the treatment of the prisoners quickly deteriorated. Punishment for minor infractions was brutal, food became scarce, and beatings became common. In September 1944, Allied planes began raiding the airfield, making the airstrips unusable. When the Japanese guards abandoned the use of prisoners as a workforce, the death rate climbed sharply. In January 1945, the guards stopped feeding the prisoners, and fearing an invasion, decided to move them some 260 kilometres away to Ranau. The first force march occurred that month, with those who fell behind being bayoneted to death or shot. By the 26th of June, only 6 of the prisoners in Sandakan were left alive. By then, Orr had become another victim of Sandakan, having been shot while a prisoner of war on the 4th of March 1945. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour to my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Jack Sidney Orr, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for reading of the Ode and signing of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we who are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozier or in the low scrubs at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the directors and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a pleasant evening. Thank you.